Hello, everybody, and we're just loading people into the webinar at this point. But as we do, we're going to begin with a little ULI video to speak about our upcoming prop tech series that might be of interest to you. If you could run that, please.
Having tools that allow you to better understand your operations and make more data-driven decisions will give companies an edge.
If you want to make a bigger impact, then we're going to go and understand people's behavior.
If the tool works and it enables you to do your job more efficiently, it will get adopted.
With so many people being inundated by technology and information, what wave do you jump on?
I think it's really important that we, as an industry, open up and be much more collaborative about the solutions that we apply.
Now is the time to create better, build better, and be better.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Joy. I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Land Institute, and welcome to today's program, City of Burlington, Building Diverse and Complete Communities in Burlington. I'll also note that this is our season finale of an incredible season of events that we've produced over the last year, and we thank you all for being part of that journey. Not only have we achieved record attendance for a year, as of a few days ago, we also hit another milestone, and we are now the largest district council in the global network that spans across Europe, Asia Pacific, and North America. And the Toronto Regional Chapter, which is more or less the Greater Golden Horseshoe in geography, is now the very largest. So that's a new update for you all as we begin this season finale. Burlington, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, our lands are spanning from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment, are steeped in Indigenous history. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We'd also like to acknowledge the land on which we gather virtually is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. ULI stands in solidarity with the Indigenous communities demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. So we'd like to acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly those who are descended from those brought here through enslavement. To better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, we recommend 3 programs that we've uploaded to YouTube and will be put into the chat for your future reference. 13,000 years of Indigenous history in the GTHA and why it matters to planning and development. Whose land and whose law, and most recently, Indigenous Toronto, the stories our city paved over. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. As you know, you're going to be muted throughout the session to ensure that there's no audio interferences. Closed captioning for this session is available, and there may be some slight delay, and it may not be 100% accurate, for which we apologize. If you have any questions for the speakers, which we encourage, please use the Q&A function and or upvote the questions that you like and want to have addressed in that priority. This session is being recorded and will be sent to you following. And if you want to take the conversation online, please use the handle at ULI, Twitter handle at ULI Toronto, or the hashtag #AskGreatQuestions. I'd like to extend our sincere appreciation to our annual sponsors. Today's event and all other ULI programming simply not possible without their generous support. So on behalf of ULI Toronto, I'd like to thank them for that support. As mentioned, we rely on our sponsors to provide quality programming and to help drive our mission of creating and sustaining thriving communities. So again, to all of them, we say thank you. Finally, we are pleased now to feature Mayor Marianne Meed Ward and the City of Burlington today in what is officially, as mentioned, our final program of our 2020-2021 season, and our 10th mayor and city in our inaugural series of the Greater Golden Horseshoe Municipalities. It is also the second time that we have featured Mayor Meed Ward on a webinar this year. Mayor Meed Ward also spoke on a program, Strong City, Challenging the Authority of Modern Canadian Cities, which explored the potential for stronger constitutional powers for municipalities. We'll probably get some flavor of that today as well. Mayor Marianne Meed Ward was elected as the 29th Mayor of Burlington, Ontario in October 2018. She is also the second woman to hold that position in Burlington's history, only the second. Throughout the recent COVID-19 pandemic, the mayor has focused on health and safety of our community through initiatives like Burlington COVID Task Force, public telephone, town halls, and advocacy to other levels of government to support local businesses and their employees. Mayor Meed Ward is working hand in hand with Burlington City Council leadership team and staff to help the city grow and thrive. Through initiatives like the mayor's Red Tape, Red Carpet Task Force, love that name, she led the city in partnering with the local businesses to identify and remove the challenges to business expansion and attraction. In her commitment to responsible future growth and the development in Burlington, she is partnering on initiatives like the new official plan that will ensure future growth happens in the right places and the right scale to align with the community's vision. Mayor Meed Ward and Council are working to ensure Burlington is diverse and inclusive, and supporting initiatives like the LGBTQ+ rainbow crosswalks and pride events, BIPOC-focused art installations, and the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable and local communities on accessibility and inclusivity. She is committed to responsible spending while still investing in infrastructure improvements, transit, and tree planting. She and Council have already implemented several measures to protect Burlington's environment, including a private tree protection bylaw, yay, and the declaration of a climate emergency. Mayor Meed Ward became a board member of the Large Urban Caucus Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, so a Large Urban Caucus is LUMPCO, I love that, great, in August of 2020, and during her 2-year term, she will help advocate on issues of shared importance for large urban municipalities, which she has done. On her path to becoming Mayor, Marianne served as a Burlington City Councilor for 2 consecutive terms from 2010 to 2018. Prior to that, in her career in politics, she worked for 22 years as a journalist for clients including the Toronto Sun, Vision, TV, CBC, CHCH News, Chatelaine, Ryerson University, and more, committed to keeping people informed about the issues and information that impact their lives. She lives in Burlington with her husband, 3 children, and their Wheaton Terrier, Boston. And with that, Mayor Meed Ward, over to you.
Thank you so much. And Boston is quietly sleeping beside me as we speak, but may make an appearance later if we get a mail delivery. So just a heads up about that. Thank you so much for that introduction. I love what I do, and this is, I think, reflective of the work that Council has done. We're a very busy Council. We call ourselves the Giddy Up, Let's Go. Lots of great things, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So I really want to thank all of you for giving up your lunch hour to spend time with myself and our amazing panelists and moderator. I want to thank them for being here as well. And of course, Urban Land Institute for the repeat performance. So I'm really delighted to be back again to talk with you about these really important issues in our entire GTHA. And I hope you find some of what we're reflecting on today helpful in your work in your municipality. I do want to talk a little bit about the journey that we have been on as a city with respect to accommodating growth. What we've had to accommodate right now up to 2031, what's coming down the pipeline 2031 to 2051, and how we are accommodating newcomers. So to get started in the journey, I'll just go back to 2018. New mayor and 5 new members of council. So a huge overturn in the election of 2018, and the single issue, most important issue ahead of all the others was planning and development, and specifically development in the downtown. People saw overdevelopment happening, high rises threatening the character of downtown and the heritage and access to the waterfront. So they spoke and said that the official plan as it was being developed at that time was not their vision for the downtown, and elected really a brand new council to change it, which we did. So very early in our term, we did a couple of things. First, we brought forward an interim control bylaw. I know not the most popular tool in the development industry, but a necessary one. When you want to push pause on applications to have a deeper dive into your planning policies. And that's exactly what we did, to study the major transit station area around the GO station, which is the blue blob, I'll call it, at the top of your screen. And it's connected to the urban growth center and major transit station area in downtown Burlington, which is the lower blob. So both of those areas, the two MTSAs as they are known, one of which is also an urban growth center, which we'll talk about. We spent a year studying those policies, and we in the downtown, our MTSA was designated thus because we have a bus terminal, really a transit shelter with 300 boardings and alightings, yet we were in the same classification of MTSAs as Pearson and Union Station. So no question that we needed to study what that all meant, and it was being used to justify overdevelopment in the downtown, that particular designation. The second step that we took really simultaneously was to review the official plan in downtown Burlington. I'll talk more about that a few slides on, but we needed to take a closer look at the downtown, and we called our study exactly that, to review the precinct policies. So the ICBL MTSA, I know we love our acronyms in planning, and the OP review happened at the same time. And the OP policies, we studied over the course of a year, and we got an extra 6 months to do that work because of COVID. So part of what came out of both of those studies was a review of the major transit station designation downtown. There was a really not controversial decision that it really didn't belong downtown, but it did belong at the GO station, so it remains there. And we've written stronger policies to inform what that looks like at the GO station. But we also looked at more closely at the urban growth center designation in the downtown. And we could spend the rest of the show talking about that, which we won't. But the result of the planning analysis that was done, there's Boston, was that the boundaries for the urban growth center should be shifted and adjusted to align with the Burlington GO and with the MTSA lands around the GO station. So that announcement just came from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing about a week ago. We still have a little bit of work ahead of us at Halton Region. As a two-tier municipality, they're the ones that can make that decision for us. So having said all of that, it's really important to point out that saying no to a specific application, development application, or saying we think that the designations aren't appropriate is not saying no to development. It is just asking for better development. And as Richard said in his opening remarks, it's asking for the right development of the right scale in the right place. So we are open for business in Burlington. So just to give you a flavor of what that looks like and why this conversation today around making room for diverse communities and newcomers is so important. We currently have 45 major development applications in different stages of review, and 54 tall or mid-rise buildings as part of those in various stages of review. That will result, so in 2020, 670 residential units approved. In 2021, we've had 22 major development pre-consultations. That's over and above the 45 that we already have. And there are approximately 5,700 residential units that have approval going to final site plan, and 7,100 on top of that that don't have zoning approval but are in various stages of review. In terms of the construction value of residential and commercial building permits that were approved in 2020, 370 million, which is bigger than our city budget, just to put that in context. And in 2020, over 680 building permits issued for non-residential development, resulting in 124,000 square meters of floor space. So the slide shows you really the clustering and where some of those are. So we are still open for business, processing applications, and really this is about ensuring the right development in the right place and at the right scale. So we completed our official plan review last fall. It was approved by Halton Region, but as you know, OPs are always in flux, and just as soon as you're done one, you're into the next. So we are actually now in the middle of a Halton Region official plan review. As a two-tier municipality, they have their own review process, of course, that affects us. And so we are in the middle of that. As part of that review, the final steps will be taken around the relocation of the major transit station area from downtown and keeping it at the GO station, and adjusting the boundaries of the urban growth center from downtown to align with the MTSA at the GO. And this will come back. We'll come back to this piece in a moment because it has direct relevance to the conversation around accommodating newcomers and what's in the region's plan for accommodating. One other piece of work that we have done, which I'm really excited about, is our Burlington Lands Partnership. And the city has said that really we know that to better control and partner on development, to get the goals that we wish as a community, we need to be in the lands business. And this is a potential step in the direction of a municipal development corporation, but we've structured it sort of as a made in Burlington approach. And the lands partnership is really three-pronged in terms of its goals. We want to focus on economic growth and job creation. We want to look at supply of affordable housing, which is critically important for all our residents, especially our newcomers, and also use it as a tool to implement community building initiatives, new community amenities that enhance the quality of life for all residents. So all three prongs, we recognize that the private sector cannot deliver alone, and so partnerships are critically important. And so we built the lands partnership structure to be a, an equal partner in delivering that. So what does the future look like for Burlington? Well, we know growth is coming to our entire region, and that includes our city. So between now and 2051, between the 2031 to 51, we need to accommodate in Halton Region 1.1 million people in total. We're at about 600,000 now, so that means another 400,000 people in that time period. Plus, we need to accommodate 500,000 jobs, and we are at about 280,000 now. So an additional amount, over 200,000 there as well. And 83,000 of those jobs are in Burlington. As part of the review that Halton Region is currently undertaking, a number of growth scenarios, so 5 growth scenarios have been put forward and out for discussion for about a year now. And we're coming to the last stages of assigning where that growth will go for both jobs and municipalities in Halton Region, including where that lands in Burlington. So we know that we will probably, depending on the scenario in Burlington, we will need to accommodate between 43,000 and 60,000 new residents. And most of that growth we expect will go around our 3 GO stations for transit-oriented development. And that's in line with provincial policy. And that's one of the reasons why we want to shift the urban growth center to one of those GO stations and amplify the work of the major transit station areas around those 3 GO stations. And separately, we've embarked on a citywide study, which will take about a year, to develop detailed precinct policies and area secondary plans for each of those 3 GO station areas. So very exciting time in the region. And we know that really we are building mini cities in each of those 3 GO stations, which means we need not just housing, we need services, we need jobs, we need parks, we need community centers and community amenities and everything that a complete community would need in a much smaller area. So as we grow and as we accommodate for growth, Burlington is also becoming more diverse. So in the last official census for us was in 2016. And if we look back over what's changed between 1996 and 2016, we can see just how much our community is evolving. In 2016, 24% of Burlington's population identified as immigrants to Canada at some point in their life, so almost a quarter. And I know there's probably a perception that the burbs are very homogenous in our makeup, and we're not, and it's certainly changing. So most of that immigration historically has come from Europe, Asia, and then the Americas. The UK has held the top spot for us, but more recently the numbers are indicating a change, with Asia being the '1 region for us for growth. So our 24,000 immigrants in 2016 was 22% in 06 and 20% in 1996. So we see that trending up. As of 2016, about 15% of Burlingtonians say their mother tongue is neither English nor French, and that's up from 11% in 1996. And this is the real eye-opening statistic. 16% of our population right now belong to visible minorities. That number in 1996 was 5%. So huge shift, and we expect that to continue. We will see about 1,000 new immigrants in Burlington alone each year, and that's been pretty consistent over the past 15 years, but we know the makeup of that 1,000 is changing. We also had 3,250 immigrants in that 5-year census period between 2011 and 16 who identified as refugees. So one of the interesting things from a planning perspective is that diverse communities have different housing patterns. And I know our moderator from Milton, Zishan Hamid, can talk a lot about this too. But we are seeing multiple families and multi-generations living in the same household unit in areas that we see more newcomers settling in our city. And that's probably a combination of factors, partly due to housing costs, but also cultural reasons, having multi-generations live together. So as a result, the old planning counts of people per unit are way off, way off. And where we see that rubber hit the road is in our schools. So when we in the city built Alton Public School and High School in the Alton neighborhood, which has attracted a huge amount of newcomers to Burlington, that's been an area where they have tended to settle. And the school was bursting at the seams from the day it was opened, and multiple portables. And this is happening throughout Halton region in areas where in neighborhoods that have been attractive to newcomers, that the population counts are really not appropriate. We also have more adult children living at home, and I can attest to that, kids in my 20s, and that's partly because of costs. And so the result is this, that Burlington has surpassed our share of population growth out to 2031 a long time ago. We were targeted or forecasted to grow to 183,000 people by 2031. We hit that number a couple of years ago, according to the census, and will likely top over 200,000, roughly 208,000 by 2031. And that's because of more people per unit. And so when we start thinking about planning for the future, counting units may be less helpful to us, but getting a much better handle on how many people per unit is going to be necessary, because when you have huge population growth, you have huge demand for services, but that's not reflected in our unit counts. We also want to make sure that we accommodate our newcomers in planning decisions. And that's been trickier because of language issues. So we do have closed captioning of our meetings. We have some translation services available, but at the moment, if you attend a planning meeting on a development application in your neighborhood, it's in English, and we don't have the capacity for translation. However, we are committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion at the City of Burlington. We recently unanimously endorsed the Halton EDI Charter, which is on your screen. We updated our sponsorship and donation policies to look through an EDI lens, and we updated our naming policies. And that's, of course, in the news regularly, including this past week, around the names of city assets in planning, another key consideration. So I'm going to stop there. And I'll just put my contact information on the screen. I want to get to the questions and your thoughts as quickly as we can. If you want to reach me, I'm easy to find on email, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. I've not plunged into TikTok yet. My kids tried to teach me about Snapchat and I still don't get it. So those are the areas you can find me right now. And I'll turn it back over to you, Richard, and we'll start with the panel discussion.
Well, thank you very, very much. Lots to tuck into there. So appreciate that. And maybe we'll grab those contacts and we'll put them into the chat box as well if people didn't scribble that down. But I'm just going to move things along. It's my pleasure now to introduce our moderator for today's session that will include Mayor Meed Ward. That's Regional Councillor Zishan Hamid, or Z. A resident of Milton for over a decade, Councillor Hamid lives in Milton with his wife and children. After 2 terms as a town councillor, he was elected as a regional councillor in 2018. Z is an active volunteer and gives his time to matters he feels passionately about, including mental health, sustainability, and livable communities. Outside of his council duties, Councillor Hamid is an executive in a Toronto tech company. So with that, I'm going to hand it over, and I'm just watching the clock here. We'll make sure we have time for one great question. So audience, put in a question and vote for the question you think is your most pressing or wanting to be answered. If we have time for 2, we'll get to it, but we're probably going to be a little tight. So Councillor, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you very much for ULI Toronto for the privilege of sharing this virtual stage with so many accomplished people. So it is now my role as a moderator of the panel discussion to introduce a panelist. I'm actually going to pass the microphone virtually, of course, to our panelists to introduce themselves. Let's start with Rebecca Lau, who is a planner with the City of Burlington. Rebecca, can you unmute yourself and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, thanks, Lee. So as you mentioned, my name is Rebecca Lau. I'm a planner on the city's development review team. My daily work involves reviewing planning applications on a variety of development projects around the city, as well as helping residents and folks in the development industry navigate our city's planning processes, policies, and guidelines.
Thank you. Next, we have Gabriela Kovac, the co-chair of Halton Newcomers Steering Committee. Gabriela. If you're speaking, then you're muted.
I'm there.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Gabriela Kovac. I'm the co-chair on my 2nd term with the Halton Newcomer strategy. We have been talking about who I represent today. I'm a newcomer. I'm a resident of Burlington. I'm the co-chair of Halton Newcomer Steering Committee for, I don't know, over 8 years. And as well, I'm an employment consultant with Mohawk College, trying to help newcomers to navigate the system of employment in Canada. But today, definitely, I'm representing Halton Newcomer Steering Committee here as a resident of Burlington as well.
Awesome, thank you. Finally, we have Ashwin Silvakamaran, Chair of Halton Newcomer Strategy Youth Advisory Council. Ashwini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, C. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be with you all today alongside my wonderful panelists. My name is Ashwini. I'm an incoming 4th-year undergraduate student at the University of Toronto. I'm a resident of Milton alongside Z, and today I'm here representing the Halton Newcomer Strategy Youth Advisory Council, which I've been chairing for the past 2 years. So I'm looking forward to a very productive discussion with you all.
Thank you, and thank you so much to our panel members and Mayor Meed Ward for volunteering their time. We have much to discuss, so let's jump right in. My first question is for Gabriela and Ashwini. What are newcomers' biggest challenges and top priorities when locating in Halton in general and Burlington in specific? So Gabriela, to you first.
The topics usually when we are talking about what are the challenges, always they are the same. I would say always the top 5 have been the language barrier, the employment challenges, the housing, transportation issues, cultural barriers. Like clearly every time in any conversation, actually we have been talking in one of our table conversation with the Halton residents in general a few years ago when we put the strategic plan together for Halton newcomer strategy. We have been talking about the challenges, and every time during my first term and my second term again during the roundtable conversation, these have been the top 5, and kind of makes sense because when you're looking to the data the Western University put together for us based on census. Unfortunately, Mayor, this is the only data we have. We have a census this year. We might have new data coming up. What they showing us, a really interesting fact, was showing us that the newcomers usually migrate as well when they arrive to Canada based on housing. They are not migrating from one city to other city or from one region to other region based on employment. They are the first challenge is the housing. If they cannot settle, if they don't have immerse in that area where they want to feel inclusive and immerse in terms of the culture issues, they will move in a different city. The second part, they were looking to the transportation to see, okay, I'll move there, but how I'll be able to commute from work to home. And the third one definitely is the employment, which is kind of an eye opener when we talk about planning and how we immerse newcomers into the conversation.
That was really helpful. Thank you. And Ashwini, anything to add for the same question?
Yes, Gabriela did a great job answering. So I definitely cannot speak specifically to Burlington, but as I sit on the chair of the strategy committee for youth, we have representatives from all parts of Halton. And definitely when you think about accessibility, you want to factor in the youth voice and make sure that they have their input and it's what's being considered. And the 2 main issues for youth that are really rising up as things that we need to combat or that we need to challenge are transportation issues and cultural barriers or accessibility, like Gabriela was saying. One thing that really jumps out to me in particular within cultural barriers is how youth communicate with their peers or people in school compared to their families. In fact, the other day we were having a conversation about things like pronouns. Pronouns have become a very popular topic in Canada and North America, introducing myself, for example, as she, her. But for many immigrants or newcomers to the community, it can be difficult to bring that kind of information back to their families and try to explain it in a language that might not always be accessible or accommodating. So that's one thing that maybe we have to think around and see how we can better accommodate or account for slang or new terms that people are learning in terms of both youth and differentiation with their families. Secondly, within transportation, one of the biggest things we're encountering with the Youth Strategy Committee is how we can provide accessible means or more informative ways of allowing youth to learn about transport or modes of transportation. Specifically because of COVID-19, a lot of newcomers who have come into the community, they didn't have a reason to go and find transport, but now that things are opening up in the summer, a lot of them are more confused and they don't find the website or resources online accessible. So in my opinion, I think there does need to be a little bit more brainstorming in how we can make this easily accessible and more transparent for youth and other members of the community.
That was a really good discussion. Actually, I have a few follow-up questions. So Mayor Meed Ward, I'll go to you for the first follow-up question. Gabriela spoke about housing, and one issue that all municipalities are grappling with is affordable housing. So how is Burlington working to address the issue of affordable housing?
Thank you for that. We have actually launched a formal housing strategy initiative. So we will spend a year looking at every single tool, idea, grant program available here or anywhere else. We're happy to borrow great ideas from across Canada or anywhere else that we find them. So we had our first stakeholder meeting. We've brought together representatives of housing as well as housing supports, mental health supports. So we have the region around the table. We have Habitat for Humanity. We have development industry representative from West End Home Builders, and a whole group of about 30 stakeholders, as well as members of council. And there are, I know folks, and it's actually one of the questions, folks are saying, well, is inclusionary zoning the only way that we can achieve this? And no, it's actually one of many, many tools available to us, and there's funding from federal and provincial levels. It can be tough to navigate. You almost need well, you do need full-time staff assigned to chasing those dollars. But we want to be really creative in how we address this issue. And that's part of the reason why we developed the Burlington Lands Partnership, that we know the private sector cannot, without going bankrupt, do this on their own. We have to get together. And that's in some respects how affordable housing was built back in the day. So we don't have a lot of rental housing being built now because the programs that helped incent those from the federal and provincial governments in the 70s, went away. So that's just one example, but it will take a true partnership and some creativity. So stay tuned on that. We expect to have some formal recommendations around the best tools for us in early 2022.
Thank you for that. And Rebecca Lau, as a planner, do you have anything to add about housing as well as transportation? Because that's also something Gabriela and Ashwini brought up.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Transportation and land use planning go hand in hand. And I think that's something that our new official plan really tries to focus on. In our new official plan, we're focusing intensification and growth around, like the mayor said, around our GO stations and also around along transit corridors. So this will hopefully enable people to live in places that are more easily walkable and that are more accessible to address the needs of newcomers and also of our aging population as well. As people start to probably lose the ability to keep their licenses, it's important to have options for people to live in places that are walkable and accessible through other means other than driving.
Yeah, that's helpful. So Rebecca, a follow-up question then. Speaking of planning process, how is Burlington working to make the planning process easier and more efficient? And what are some of the common roadblocks that applicants generally face, and how can they proactively address them?
Yeah, so that's a two-parter. So I'll start with the first one, which is about how we're making the planning process more efficient. So one of the things we're really focusing on is really bolstering that process before a complete application is submitted. Sometimes, a lot of the times, we find that applications we receive might be missing information, and we also have a lot of community concerns that come up when an application is submitted and is circulated for comment. So through our pre-application process, city staff try to provide as much information as possible to proponents to help them prepare a fulsome package that can be reviewed in a timely fashion by staff. And also we require applicants to pre-consult with the community before an application is submitted. And this helps to start the dialogue early on in the process and allows proponents to change and respond to these community concerns well in advance of an application. I think the second question was about common roadblocks. So speaking of diversity, one of the common roadblocks we encounter has to do with accessible parking spaces. So currently the AODA, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, requires a certain number of van accessible spaces, which are typically wider parking spaces, as well as regular parking spaces. But our current zoning bylaw hasn't quite caught up to the AODA yet. So our parking rates don't fully reflect the number of type A and type B spaces that we require. So that's something that could be easily fixed. In our pre-application process, staff do provide that requirement. So that's something that I think applicants can easily address before submitting an application.
Thank you. That's a great approach, actually. I took some notes to share with Milton staff later. So Ashwini and Gabriela, in your view, how can newcomers have a bigger voice in the future growth and design of the communities that they'll call home? So Ashwini, to you first this time.
Sure. Well, one thing that I've learned in my experience or expertise with working with youth is that they love to have their voices heard and they love to have their input factored. So really making sure there's a lot of opportunity for youth to get involved. Even when I was invited to speak on this panel today, I was so ecstatic to have this opportunity to share my voice with you all. And I think just providing more opportunities in general for youth to get involved is very important. Panel discussions are a great way, but also a lot of open meetings, a lot of advertising on social media, which I see is starting to happen. Approaching it through many different ways. I know Mayor Ward was saying that she hasn't experimented with TikTok yet, which is totally okay. But with a few different other social media platforms that youth frequently congregate or attracts them, we should have a focus more so on advertising and making sure that their voices are instrumental and that they know that their voices and input are factored. Especially during COVID-19, I can speak for the youth community definitely on this topic. A lot of youth in particular feel that their voices are not really important when factored into the COVID-19 response management, or they're sort of overshadowed by other things that are being focused on. But I think it's so pertinent to make sure that they realize they're the future leaders of tomorrow and they really are the catalyst for change, especially in the community. So my biggest piece of advice would be, first of all, making sure they know their voices are instrumental for change. And secondly, providing them ample opportunities to get involved, whether it is open panel discussions like this, having open meetings and inviting different youth representatives, and also making sure youth are attracted from different communities. So different socioeconomic backgrounds, BIPOC representation, reaching out to a lot of Indigenous, Black, South Asian communities. Those are really important in making sure that you have a fair representation of youth and their families in whatever communities you're reaching out to.
This is some great advice. Gabriela, anything to add from your end?
I will echo exactly what Ashwini was saying, but I want to add something that I'm sure many of our participants today are not aware, that the City of Burlington staff was part of a leadership initiative project, was more like an in-house training delivered accidentally by Mohawk College, where I was invited as a Halton Newcomers Strategy co-chair during that time to their project. The final project was exactly with this topic, like involving newcomers in, and kind of putting the voice of newcomer back to the strategies that City of Burlington will implement in the city strategic plan. And I have been participated with a lot of other newcomers from Burlington, and we have been asked in terms of what will be our interest, how we see city coming back to us and invite us to be part of the conversation. And since that, I'm start receiving a lot of invitation to be part of roundtable conversation or mayor city roundtable conversation, or whenever anything gets implemented from park. I was invited lately to some patio opening conversation from downtown Burlington, which we have a really nice park, and not just Burlington, it's kind of using this park, and I'm sure that other cities are coming and having a great time in our park. I want to say that a lot of steps have been moving forward to involve the newcomers, but newcomers as well needs to be open and participate in all these activities, because if we want to have a win-win kind of situation, we need 50% us being involved in the conversation, as 50% we have been invited to the conversation. And I want to echo this amazing project that City of Burlington did in the past year, and I'm sure we can continue the conversation. And Mayor, if you need any translation, we have tons of volunteers with different languages, which will be more than happy to put their time. And especially right now, because a lot of meetings have been, going online, like we don't have really to be in person, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure we'll have tons of volunteers who are willing to translate in the Zoom. Zoom has this ability to have different languages being translated in a real time, like live.
I had no idea you could do that in Zoom, so I just learned something, and I might reach out to you.
Part of my job is to be trainer, and I'm doing a lot of training and a lot of Zoom. I know Zoom in and out. I want to go back to my real delivery, but I'm happy to manage with what I have right now.
No, this was super helpful. Mayor Meed Ward, just to add to something you said, I downloaded Snapchat for exactly 30 seconds and I couldn't figure out how to get out of the camera. And I haven't tried anything that came after that. So my question to you is, and it's the last question before I pass the gavel to Richard for audience questions. When planning a policy, especially something as important as related to growth and planning in complete communities, how do you personally make sure that you hear from the entire Burlington community to build a community that works for everyone and not just certain segments of the community?
That's a great question. So it starts, and I think Gabriela and Ashwini touched on this as well, in making sure that the message is delivered across every single platform that you can find. And I know our staff do that as well. So the traditional model is a hard copy, snail mailed letter in English around, I believe it's 120 meters, Rebecca can correct me. And that's it. That's the legal requirement. And you can see that that is not going to reach people. So putting all of the notices of there's a meeting coming up on my social feeds, building connections with people in the community. And that's easier in my role, simply because people reach out to me and that gives us an open channel to have dialogue. One of the things about COVID is that it has put some of the back burner nice to have issues as not only nice to have or need to have now, but absolutely essential. And one of those, two of those are digital applications for permits, which streamlines things. But the other piece is this notion about how do we include more people in the conversation. And we had a recent application, Rebecca's actually the planner on the file, for redevelopment of Millcroft Golf Course. We struggled through COVID about how to have a meeting. We couldn't gather, so we had an online meeting and 716 people came to the online platform. We could never have accommodated that many people because we don't have a venue that's quite big enough, right? Plus all the planners and the staff. Our performing arts is about the closest we can get. We had 54 or 60 delegations come to our virtual meetings to make presentations, including, and Ashwini will be happy to hear this, a 5-year-old, Lila, youngest delegate. And she talked about how important the turtles were to her on the golf course. Makes it real, right? And then the other piece, which I think is really important for the discussion we're having, is that when community is connected, and we do other things to try and connect people to their neighbors, there were people in that community that didn't have computers or didn't know how to work Zoom. And so their neighbors became their voices for each other. And I think this, until we figure out, and thank you, Gabriela, for the translation services, I will take you up on that. But we were able to hear even more voices than just those, because neighbors said, I got handwritten letters scanned and emailed to me by neighbors, for example. So we could do that with translated services. So that's one of the things where we've had to adapt, but it has so many implications, and you wonder why we weren't doing this from the get-go. Right, so we really do need to focus on making sure that the language is accessible, but also that the wording is accessible. And we've worked on that with our planning department, because I know all the planners out there will chuckle that sometimes it's the language that you're legally required to put in a notice isn't all that friendly to residents, and they read it and still wonder what what's going on. So doing a better job of speaking in plain English and all the other languages we want to accommodate to.
That's a great point. The first public notice I ever read in my life, way before I got involved, was talking about a podium of a building. And I was like, why is that an issue? What's the big deal with a podium? I had no idea what that was. And I suspect most people don't. So I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out to answer the questions I had. And now I'll pass the microphone to Richard for some audience questions, right on time.
Perfect. Well, you've done very well, Councillor. So I didn't think we'd actually have much time, but we have a good 10 minutes of questions. So I see they're starting to trickle in. I'll start with the very first one, and I've got a couple of back pocket ones as well, but I might not get to them. First one, Hannah Motasim Ali is asking, how do you imagine new residential developments around the GO station will accommodate multi-gen families in terms of size of units as well as cost? What other approaches outside of inclusive zoning address affordability of these larger units is the question. I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, but maybe an opportunity expansion. I'm going to assume that is to Mayor Meed Ward, but Councillor, if you or others want to jump in on that as well, please do.
Certainly, I'll take a stab. We know we need larger units inside the high rises that are coming. We also know that they're extremely expensive, and this is something that not a lot of people know. And I just learned that per square foot, it is more expensive to build a 3-bedroom apartment in a multi-residential dwelling than it is to build a 3-bedroom townhouse, because superstructures cost more per square foot than stick structure construction. And so we're going to have to grapple with that and figure out how to, and you know, I got this straight from a developer that works with Mattamy, and they said, you know, average 3-bedroom town is about 900,000, still not affordable for most people. But you put that same 3-bedroom into an apartment and you're talking 1.1 million. So these are huge challenges, and we have to be aware of that differential. And so looking at building what we call ground-oriented housing, or you walk out your front door and you're at ground level, townhouse type, that's your podium Z. I had to learn what that was too. And then your high rises and maybe your smaller units above that, because what we have discovered is that families really still want to be at the ground. They want to have a bit of a yard. They want to be able to walk out their front door. And if given the choice, they will choose that. And so that is a huge consideration planning, because land is at such a premium. I'll stop there and see if Rebecca wanted to add anything.
Sure. Rebecca, throw to you.
Oh, this is a tough one. I don't have any answers, unfortunately, but I think we are doing a housing strategy. So it's something I will definitely take back, bring up with our policy team.
Well, indeed, it is a tough one. And I think that any councillor, mayor, planner, developer in the Greater Golden Horseshoe would have a challenge answering that question. And in any part of our region, it's just the nature of our market right now. So fair enough. Okay, I'm going to go to next question here, and I'm just going to pick my top voted, and I think it might have sort of been addressed, but let's underscore something here. What is the city's priorities around growth and development, especially given high immigration levels predicted in future years? So if you know, maybe that's again to the mayor, and but I think councillor, come in on this one as well as a regional councillor. In your mind, the top 2 priorities with respect to growth and development in connection to high immigration? Actually, you all could come in on this too. Actually.
Yeah, I'll start and just say it's really focused in terms of the biggest amount of growth is around our GO stations, but we have what we call secondary nodes. Those are our older plazas with acres and acres and acres of parking and a single-story structure. Whether that's a mall or whether that's a plaza, we know that some of those are already being developed. We just have approved an application for 2 towers on a retail plaza. We're going to see more of that. And then I'll call it gentle growth by way of secondary suites in established neighborhoods, which don't change the character but add more population. So those are just three of the ways that we know we can accommodate this growth.
Yeah, I'll thank you for directing the question to me as well. I'll touch upon a few areas that Milton's dealing with right now because of high level of immigration, which leads to high level of diversity. One thing that I never thought about until it was brought up and we started dealing with is places of worship. So as different faith groups have gone up, as Mayor Meed Ward mentioned, land is in short supply. So we can't continue building places of worship like they were built in 70s and 80s and 90s. So we're actually working with different faith groups to figure out more multi-use places of worship, or places of worship that don't require 1,000 parking spaces. Mayor Meed Ward also mentioned multi-generational homes, and that leads to an issue of designing homes slightly differently compared to how they're traditionally been designed. Asian countries and Europe have dealt with some of that before us. So there's a lot of strategies and ideas that we can learn from, but a lot of changes like that, how people live, how people move around. We're actually learning a lot from different diverse communities that have moved to this area. And that in turn then improves planning for everyone else. Thanks for the question, Richard.
Who else would like to jump in on this? And I'll look at Ashwini and Gabriella as well, and maybe Rebecca, but from your lens, priority around growth and development, particularly with respect to immigration, how do you see it? Maybe you have a different lens on that same question. Ashwini, or actually Gabriella, you're off mute. Let's start with you.
The beauty of jumping on, unmuting myself. I will, I think, you know, when you're moving and settle as a family, how I arrived 18 years ago, you just end up based on sometimes the job you have, you know, the offer you had before you're arriving. For a youth perspective, usually you settle initially based on where your university or college you have been coming as an international student. So like this is how you pick and choose initially. But as I mentioned before, that the data from Western, what showed us when we started the conversation with the newcomers around our strategic roundtable, we identified the fact that in the first years, newcomers are moving from the initial place where they did settle when they arrive to the place where they want to, how I like to say, from a house to a home. Like my house was Hamilton, my home is Burlington. And when I arrived close to my husband, the place of work, which was McMaster. But when I remember, like the first, I missed the Christmas parade from Hamilton, and I was Googling, and I saw that it's the Burlington parade coming. And as I have two small children, I was coming to the parade. I left my car at the Burlington Mall, and after the parade, we have to come around to the lakeshore to go back to Hamilton. And when I saw all this, you know, fairy of lights around all these houses, I was telling to my husband, this is a place where I want to call home. Wow. And a few months after, when our first lease expired, because you have to stay for 1 year where you settle initially, in our case, not for the international students, we moved to Burlington, and we moved to Burlington in a small apartment. We rented, and we bought our first house. Now we are moving to the next house. I think it's a process.
Right.
Definitely the process is based on affordability in general. It's based on the budget, but nevertheless, it's a combination. Clearly, it's a combination between all these three major important issues, which is the house you want to call home, you want to have a job that it's where you live, obvious, and you want to feel that cultural immersion, which I really felt in Burlington. Like I feel that I was, you know, kind of meeting all these requirements.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we're run up against the clock. Ashwini, if you wanted to have a quick 30 seconds, but I love the fact that Santa Claus factored into your decision to live in Burlington. That's incredible. I wasn't expecting that. Ashwini, quick, 30 seconds, literally, I'm sorry.
I will try to get this in 30 seconds, but I have to say that I agree with everything Gabriela said. Actually, one of the majors that I study in university is diaspora and transnational studies, which focuses on diasporic groups and immigration. And I think it's so important, and I was really influenced in thinking about the interconnectedness or the meaning of home. For me, as a student or as a youth, I consider obviously Milton and Halton to be my home, but also Toronto and other places across Ontario are starting to become my home too when I travel for school and other purposes. So I think when centering economic growth and development priorities, we should also think about the interconnectedness of home and the meanings of different places for people and how that factors into where they're living, modes of transportation, the accessibility and ease in which they can approach this. I can talk about it a bit further, but I hope that was a good 30 seconds.
That was fantastic. And thank you. I'm sorry to cut you so short, and sorry to cut everybody so short, because we could have gone on easily another half hour. Thank you, audience. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, Rebecca, Ashwini, Gabriela. That was really, really terrific. What a great way to end our season. I couldn't have thought of a better way to do that. So thank you all. To our audience, just to let you know, we have one upcoming event on our calendar so far. That's in July. And I think that's coming up on the screen. Creating LGBTQ 2S plus safe workplaces in the city building industry, excuse me, as I cough, is coming up on July the 14th. And also, if you want to become a member of one of our committees, the window to do so is closing tomorrow. So jump on it, and we'll send this information around to anybody who emails us if we don't have it grabbed from this slide. But with that, it's 1:01. We went over time by a minute. I really, truly, again, want to thank our full panel. City of Burlington, you're terrific. All the best. It's going to be a different kind of Canada Day. I know we all know that this year. But I wish you the best for a happy long weekend, and we'll see you very soon in the new fiscal year for ULI sometime after July. Bye-bye.